Hi everyone, this is a video to help you write your paper on the King's Speech about King George VI and his struggle with a stammer in giving speeches. Bertie, as his family calls him, seeks the help of a speech therapist named Lionel. This is a photo of the real Bertie, or King George VI. Before you start to write, think about the purpose of your paper, which is going to be your thesis statement, and how you're going to organize it. Dr. Spudich has helped you with that by giving you the questions she wants you to address. The thesis statement is usually 1 to 2 sentences and goes into your introduction. It's the purpose of your paper, so you're going to generally answer these questions. In the body of the paper, you'll go into more detail with the evidence from the film to support your thesis statement. For the organization of your paper, you can answer the questions in this order, switch them around, or do something completely different as long as you address each question. Here's an example of a thesis statement I could use. Having a means of expressing ourselves is important because, and I give a reason. In the King's Speech, Bertie had a right to be heard because, and I give those reasons. The paper consists of 3 parts, an introduction and conclusion, which are each 1 paragraph, and the body of the paper, which is however many paragraphs you need it to be. In a shorter paper, 3 to 5 paragraphs is standard. Think of the introduction as an upside-down triangle. An introduction usually starts more generally and gradually becomes more specific and relevant to what you're going to talk about in the paper. Start your introduction with an attention grabber or hook. You want the reader to want to keep reading, so you have to capture their interest. You could start with a statistic on stuttering that you find on a reputable website. You could also use a quote from the film. You could tell a quick story about another person overcoming a stammer. As an example, my attention grabber might give some examples of great leaders in history who have overcome disabilities. Next, you need some background discussion about the purpose of your paper, which remember was in the thesis statement. Here was the thesis statement I was going to use. Because you're going to talk about what the King's Speech says about a person's right to be heard, you may want to give a short setup to the film. I might say, King George VI gave over 20 speeches as the King of England, despite struggling with a stammer since childhood. You could also mention that he went to a speech therapist to help him prepare for what turned out to be a historic speech. Then after the background discussion, we have the thesis statement. After the thesis statement, you might end the introduction with a map of how you're going to defend your thesis statement. You might say that you're going to use communication topics and theories shown in the King's Speech to demonstrate the importance of an individual's right to be heard. The paragraphs in the body of the paper should support your thesis statement. Each one should start with a topic sentence that explains the focus of the paragraph. Let's say in this paragraph we were going to talk about how a certain theory of communication could explain the relationship that developed between Bertie and Lionel. We could say the development of the relationship between Bertie and Lionel could be explained by the blank theory of, and give the person credit who developed the theory. Make sure you'll be able to explain how that relationship supports your thesis statement that Bertie had a right to be heard. Next, we need to provide evidence to support the topic of the paragraph. This is where you can show Dr. Spudich that you know what the theory is. In the blank theory, our relationship forms as individuals share more personal information with one another. Next, you can use examples and quotes from the King's Speech. Providing examples not only makes your paper more interesting, it gives strength to your thesis and shows that you are an authority on the topic. So we can say, in the King's Speech, Bertie gradually reveals to Lionel the trauma in his childhood that has led to the development of a stammer. Then give an example of how Lionel shared with Bertie. And give as many examples as you like. Showing your knowledge and using examples from the film are the evidence that supports your thesis. We're almost finished with our first paragraph in the body of the paper. We've shown our knowledge of the theory and given examples from the film. Next, we need to give an analysis of this evidence. We could say, since Bertie shared his childhood trauma with Lionel, Lionel could see what might have caused his stammer. Similarly, Lionel, and we could analyze the example we used when he shared with Bertie. Through this sharing, their relationship became as close as brothers. We might want to restate the name of the theory we were talking about here, too. We're finished with that idea and need to move on to a new paragraph, so we'll need a smooth transition to the next idea. Transition words help you to connect paragraphs, even sentences within paragraphs, in your paper. They help the reader understand the logic of how your ideas fit together. They help with the flow of the paper. Look for transition words in these paragraphs, like later, also, similarly. If you took out the transitions, the paragraph would sound choppy and not make a lot of sense. Let's read it without the transitions. In the King's Speech, Bertie gradually reveals the trauma in his childhood that has led to the development of a stammer. In the film Bertie talks about Lionel could see what might have caused his stammer. Lionel, their relationship became as close as brothers. Without the transition words and phrases, the connections between ideas aren't as clear. Here are some common transition words. I use for example and in addition a lot. Here's our analysis of the evidence again from our first body paragraph. Since we talked about a communication theory, maybe we now want to transition to the lesson topic, family communication. I could say, in addition to this theory, the topic of family communication can be seen in the King's Speech in the relationship between Bertie and his wife or Bertie and his children. The words in addition to make this a smooth transition to the next topic. Family communication is a good topic to go on to next because we just finished talking about the characters becoming close as brothers. In addition to using transition words, try to organize the paper so that transitions happen naturally. In the conclusion, you're giving the paper closure, but also making the reader think about what this means to them and to the world. You want to leave the reader with an impression that will stay with them. Remember how we talked about the introduction being like an upside-down triangle? Think of the conclusion as a right-side-up triangle. Start specifically talking about the King's Speech and then become broader by stating the importance of the film's message in general. First, restate your thesis statement in a new way. Remember what our thesis was. We might say, in the King's Speech, it was important for Bertie to be able to express himself in order to show he was a great leader or to lead his country into war. Next, mention briefly the theories and topics you talked about in the paper and how they tied together to support your thesis. Next, start to talk more broadly and away from the King's Speech to appeal to your audience personally. Talk about why being able to express yourself should be important to the reader. Finally, leave them with something to think about, a call for action to make sure people are heard, or some other insight about the right to be heard. That's it. If you need help writing a paper, the ACE Tutoring Center in the library is a great resource. It's a good idea to call and make an appointment first. Good luck on your paper.